On the very first Mattcast, I've had the opportunity to reunite with an old friend named Massimo, who used to work at one of the biggest local game stores in my country, and was also fortunate enough to be a part of Montreal's Grand Prix. He's one of the best Magic players I know, and in this episode we're going to be talking about the game, the future of the game, and digital versus paper Magic. Stay tuned, it's coming up next. All right, Massimo, this is the second time trying this since the last time failed, but we're going to give it another go, and it is good seeing you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to be back for the second time.
Yeah, well, I figure you missed me anyways, so
Yeah, that's true. I just can't get enough Matt.
Yeah, so we might as well have another conversation. We'll change things up a bit. I want to know, so tell me a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Massimo Gordillo. I live in Toronto. I am a University of Toronto engineering graduate, and I play a lot of Magic. I've played a lot more Magic in the past. With COVID and staying home, I found that like online tournaments and stuff weren't really for me. But in the context of Magic, I had a sort of MTG finance podcast for a couple years, a year and a half, and I played competitively for a number of years. And I actually was lucky enough to play in the last Pro Tour. Like it was my first Pro Tour, but it was like the last Pro Tour ever was the one in Phoenix. So I actually sort of was in that small piece of history, even though I did absolutely terribly. Yeah, that's pretty much. I don't know. I don't think know there's too much about myself more that you need to know than that.
Well, I mean, that's actually a pretty good starting off point. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that that was like the last GP ever. So do you actually think that GPs are going to be gone from now on? Do you think Magic will ever incorporate face-to-face play in large audiences and large groups?
It's more of a question of like how much money does a Grand Prix really make, right? Like it's not really clear how profitable that is as a venture for Wizards of the Coast, and it's very obvious that like arena tournament play, like Pro Tours or whatever they're called now, Mythic Championships, like they run pretty smoothly with a few asterisks for tournament level play. And so I mean, I imagine there's got to be a way. There's enough fervor around it. There's enough interest in paper in-person play that I imagine GPs or something similar will be back. But I don't know if we're ever going to go back to the world where there was a Grand Prix somewhere in the world every weekend. Or, I mean, I don't know if SCG, for example, made a ton of money running in-person events in comparison to what they're doing digitally now. But, having an SCG somewhere on the East Coast every weekend, like that might not be a reality anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a reality anymore either. I mean, like MTG, it's funny because once the pandemic started, MTGO was like the way that it rolled out after that. I just feel as if it was almost like the perfect time for them to really just go back like fully into digital. I knew that they wanted that to happen eventually anyways. I mean, come on, if you can cut costs printing, like you could just make so much just digitally. So
Yep.
why would you need to print as many cards and have as many face-to-face tournaments? And there's just a lot of like cost involved in that. It's just a lot more financially valuable for them just run the platform as a digital game, kind of like Hearthstone, which sucks. I hate to say that, but if you also look at paper Magic, well, what's going to happen with draft booster boxes, right? With the whole, they even changed the name to draft because it's about drafting. So if they're not going to have as many drafts, it just makes sense. Why would they have the set booster boxes released around the same time? Within the pandemic. So set booster boxes are not necessarily designed for draft, but they also run they have the lottery card kind of slot in the back that you can get like a few of them per box. And I feel like that's going to be the direction moving forward when it comes to at least paper like products. And look at singles like Secret Lair, they don't have to print like a massive booster box of like people just going through a bunch of bulk, and then just people who have I have huge storage bins full of cards. Like you won't need that anymore if you're just buying specific cards directly from Wizards of the Coast. If they're going to sell you singles, and then if you want to open up a box, forget the draft. Here's a set booster.
Yeah. I mean, it's in-person drafting definitely has this charm to it. I've done so much of my casual play has been like a draft at the store, or me and my friends crack a box and then we draft it. right? So much of and I personally prefer that over Commander or Standard or whatever else. Like there's nothing quite like having 8 friends over or 7 friends over and then cracking a box in, someone's basement or whatever. So, I mean, obviously there's a market there. I think a lot of people love limited, and I think the limited crowd is really strong still. And so I think it would be a shame if Paper Magic, was completely overhauled or like completely cut. But I think the scale at which we saw pre-pandemic, I'm not really confident will ever really return.
No, I don't believe so either. And actually, from a finance perspective, draft booster boxes I think are going to be sought after even more because people are going to want to have that same old experience like going to the store and drafting with their friends. So they'll like crack open these draft booster boxes and run their own drafts at their place. And I think that'll see a lot of boxes being open, which will increase the amount of price on the cards that are remaining sealed, the boxes that are left that are sealed, especially before the era of collector booster boxes and set booster boxes.
Right.
Like, I can even see like Return to Ravnica in a few years being over $200 a box, because that was a great set to draft. And people, if they want to have that experience again, people will see, hey, you know what, for a box that's almost 10 years old, I don't know, that's like, it seems pretty fair price to have a nice experience with your friends. I don't know. That's the way I'm looking at it from that perspective. Right. But so when did you actually get into Magic?
I played as a kid. I think I opened my first booster packs. It was in Darksteel, original Mirrodin block. And then I bought some boxes of Kamigawa, which is still one of my favorite planes. And then through high school, I didn't play. I was too cool, apparently. But in university, I had some friends that were into it. And so I think the first draft I did when I came back or when I was sort of reintroduced was Dragon's Maze, or maybe it was Gate Crash. Anyways. So yeah, Dragon's Maze, not the greatest set to draft for the first time, but I didn't really know any better anyways.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, it's funny. I got in fully competitively. At stores competitively. You're definitely way more competitive than I am. Right around the same era. But like I never was cracking packs the way you said you were, like around Mirrodin, Darksteel. I was not cracking any packs back then. Back then, I don't even think I played any Magic. I knew about Magic. The first time I actually held Magic cards like in my hand was I had a neighbor who lived on the street, and he was really into Magic. But we also grew up together. We both loved comic books. We'd go to the comic book store a lot. But eventually, I guess he would go there more often than I did. And that was right around when Magic started to become really big. It was like in the mid 90s. And he came over one day because he had a bunch of bulk and he had a long box and it was full of Magic cards. But like thinking about it right now, I don't remember every single card. Obviously, I was very young, but I do remember it was mostly cards from like Revised, 4th edition, Fallen Empires. And when I think back on that, because I have no idea what happened that box. So like, I don't know what happened to it because I never played with those cards. I don't know what happened to that long box, but I could have sworn I saw dual lands in there. So like, sometimes I literally think about that at night. It's just what happened to that long box. I'm serious.
Yeah,
I actually
seems to have that mystical story of like a box that someone gave them with a bunch of cards that they didn't recognize what they were,
Every single child of nostalgia has an experience like that. I feel like even with my older brother, he's older than me by 10 years. He buried like a bunch of like old 70s and 80s Star Wars figures up at our cottage, and he can't find them anymore. And he even tells me sometimes like, I remember burying Boba Fett, and he freaks out about it sometimes. And it's weird because people look back and you'll be able to see how much these things are worth nowadays because of platforms like eBay. That the unbelievable FOMO and nostalgia people have for like their old, treasures when they were kids. And that's why I think like secondary markets are booming right now, even with the collectibles. There's so much nostalgia, but also people don't have a lot to do if they're at home. They're getting stimulus checks. Look at the price of Pokemon cards.
Yeah, so I heard there was a boom with that because it's like, celebrities are promoting it or whatever.
Logan Paul.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's great. I mean, I think Pokemon's interesting because the old cards are exclusively collectibles, right? It's like, imagine a world where Paper Magic dies, or like they stop printing Paper Magic. It'd be similar, right? Where it's like Black Lotus and all these other cards, the value is exclusively in their collectability, which is pretty close to where it is now anyways. But, you know, you'd say like dual lands and all these commander cards that like commander staples, old cards, those would all be, all of their demand would be in collectability as opposed to like gameplay pieces, right? So, I mean, there's still a lot of world for Magic to succeed, even if, you know, they cut the paper side of things. So that's a good sign, I think, to me, because I don't know if you know this, but old Pokemon cards are terrible.
Oh,
Like
compared to the
Charizard
new
is
ones?
bad.
Oh yeah, no, compared to the new ones, they got
Yeah.
EXs, GXs, and everything else.
Right, but there's no formats, right? So it's not like you can only play old Pokemon cards with other old Pokemon cards. It's like, yeah, you can put original Charizard in your deck, but it's going to be really bad.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. That's definitely a fair point. But I mean, you don't. But isn't there still power creep today in Magic? I feel like that's like if you were to compare a lot of old cards, look at Savannah Lions. Like that used to be a good card.
Yeah.
And then now, if you compare that, that's like the most vanilla card possible in today's standards.
I mean, it's curious because there's definitely been power creep in the game, and that's going to happen in any game, you know, with the non-rotating formats in it. But it's curious that there are still some cards that are still defining, you know, still really powerful. So for example, like it seems like they're pushing the power of permanence. Like that's what you said, like Savannah Lions is like a joke in comparison to what we have today. But, you know, Force of Will, a spell, you know, Factor Fiction, like these are the kind of cards that are extremely powerful. Yawgmoth's Will, right? Like these like format defining broken cards that are non-permanents that like aren't repeatable gameplay, like, you know, attacking every turn for example. Those sort of cards haven't seen that level of power creep, right? So yeah, there's definitely power creep happening, but I think it's less extreme than like Yu-Gi-Oh, where there is literally no rotation format where every card, every new set has to push a new archetype, right? So that, like, I think we're very lucky. I think of the three big TCGs, we're the ones that experience power creep the least.
Oh yeah, and that's a good thing. I think for the longevity of the game, considering it's more of a game than it is a collectible. Although we can argue the direction of where they're going is definitely the route of the collectability versus the playability. I mean, because it always is going to have its gaming side of it, because you have MTG Arena. Whether or not it's going to be done in paper, well, they've already sorted that out with MTG Arena. And now the market, at least the secondary market, with all the reserve list buyouts that have been happening lately, and then just a lot of even older cards that aren't reserve list, that are like beta or antiquities, they're getting bought up because they're from an era where people were playing cards without sleeves. There's a lot of them out of damage out there, very heavy play. So the realization that these players are having is, well, you know, Magic's becoming more of a collectible than a game, and these are very scarce cards out there from like these older sets. If we can find them in near mint condition or get them graded, the amount of profit that they can see in the long term as an investable will be, you know, second to none. And then you look at Pokemon. Pokemon has always been seen as more of a collectible. You know, we can argue how, you know, the first couple sets of Pokemon I think are still way more overprinted than people realize. Like a lot of these prices I'm seeing, I can't even believe it. Like a regular base set Charizard, not even the Shadowless or first editions, some people are trying to sell it for $1,000. I had a binder of like a page full of them when I was a kid. Like I don't have them now, don't get me wrong, but I just feel like that some of the collectible craze that's happening today is, I feel like eventually they will get there, but I just think it's too fast, too soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the context of people having less to do with their money and time, right? Like people aren't going to bars, people aren't going to restaurants.
They have extra money. Yeah.
People aren't spending their money on other leisure activities that might require money, like, you know, rock climbing or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. So people now have access to more money. And as you said, like the stimulus checks, as much as it pains me to say this, I don't, you know, stimulus checks are not designed for Magic the Gathering cards, but I mean, people will be spending some of their stimulus money on that sort of thing, right? On collectibles, right? And so I think the context of the pandemic has shown, you know, a lot of interest in that sort of area. And I think Magic has had its best year ever, right? It's made more money than it's ever made before. So obviously, like, Magic is also profiting off of this, you know, stay-at-home boom, I guess, if that's what you want to call it.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, it's profiting from a financial sense. When it comes to growing the game, I don't necessarily think I wouldn't say it's profited from that sense of getting a bigger fan base, but that's, I guess, what the whole Worlds Beyond is all about. That's for them to grow their player base or their IP more, I suppose. Although it is technically they're branding the game with other IPs, but
Right.
you're still going to be getting players or fans, new fans,
Right.
people who like, Lord of the Rings or Warhammer.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think about that as Wizard of the Coast moves forward as to expanding its brand with other IPs and collaborating with them?
Yeah, so I think people are thinking, well, I mean, from my perspective, I think Realms Uncharted, is that what it's called? Realms Uncharted?
I think it's Worlds Beyond.
Worlds Beyond, okay.
Yeah.
So I think Worlds Beyond is an interesting sort of use case or context to look at the lens of Magic and what it means for the game in the context of like why is this here and what is it accomplishing, right? And I think if you look at the financials for Hasbro for the last year, Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering has become their most profitable brand. Like more than every other brand. Like Monopoly, Mr. Potato Head, they're small potatoes, right? In comparison to what Magic the Gathering is making. So if you put all of Hasbro's brands together, it just doesn't compete. So Hasbro now has this shift where it's no longer a toy making company that makes Magic the Gathering. It's now a Magic the Gathering company that makes toys. Right? And Hasbro obviously has many years of experience working with different IPs, selling Lord of the Rings toys. I'm guessing, I'm not 100% that they did, but if I could guess, like they have relationships.
Toy Biz made the figures, which is funny because Toy Biz also made Marvel Legends, which now Hasbro owns as well. So
so Hasbro bought that. Is that what you're saying?
They must have bought the rights, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. So Hasbro owns the rights, which makes sense why these crossovers exist. But what's happening is Hasbro is now shifting strategically to push Magic as much as it can, right? And so Magic went through this period where it was trying to accumulate as many players as it could. It sort of tapered off, and then it started making these premium products like Secret Lairs and collector boosters and all these things to sort of milk the whales, right? Like that was the next opportunity for them to make a bunch of money, right? It's like, yeah, okay, we've grown our player base. We can't invest anymore in growing it as much as we can. Let's instead, now that we have this player base, milk the ones who have a lot of money to buy all these premium products. So that makes more money, right? And now we have direct-to-consumer stuff. And now it's to the point where it's like, well, Magic needs to keep growing. Magic needs to keep growing, and this milking the whale thing has kind of worked. Let's see if we can continue to expand our user base past what we could before by bringing in other IPs, right? So remember, this is a strategic call from Hasbro, right? I'm sure literally no one at WotC was like, hey, let's make a Lord of the Rings set. Wouldn't that be great? Like, obviously, this is like a Hasbro thing saying like, well, we need 8% growth per quarter or whatever per year. So, and Magic is the lifeblood of this company, basically. So we need to find a way to continue to grow Magic. And so, I mean, I don't think Realms Uncharted is that bad. It doesn't really bother me either which way. I think as long as the game is growing and as long as the game is making money, I think that's what's most important to me. So if that's the strategy that they're going to use, I think it's great.
Well, you know what? I can't wait to play with my Legolas decks. So let me tell you, those are going to be great. I'm assuming it's going to be a lot of elves in his deck. It would be green, mono green, maybe a little bit of white in there splashed in. But yeah, either way, like I do think that there's some IPs that work a lot better, that are a little more easier to digest for some players, I suppose. There's obviously going to be the people who are like the purists, right? Who want Magic's lore to stay the same and stay within the same realm. But I think as a brand, it's okay for it to grow in that way, because it ultimately it is going to get more people into the game, and that's great because I think it's the best game ever. Yeah. And once we get more people into the game, it'll also just grow the financial side of it more. Like older sets are going to be worth more money as people want to buy into like older product and maybe experience drafts the way they used to be, in a store, but in someone's house. But I don't know. Do you think that drafts are going to be like? Do you think stores are going to have drafts after this? Do you think they're going to be able to facilitate like large crowds for a while?
I mean, it depends what you mean by like how soon, right? Like for a while, I mean, when the pandemic is over, when the majority of the population has been vaccinated, like, sure, I think that's great. I mean, it's not going to be for another probably maybe year or two from today, but that's fine. But I think there will be a world, as long as it's profitable and as long as the game stores can keep their lights on, then they'll continue to run paper drafts. I think that obviously they were profitable enough for them in the first place, and they bring people into the store. Like, so, so many people come to do a draft and then will do a trade-in at the same time, right? They'll drop their trade-in, they'll do the draft, and then they'll accept their cash, and then they'll leave, right? So yeah, I think paper Magic is going to continue. I don't think it's going to die anytime soon, but I do think that this is a critical time for Wizards to pivot to moving to digital primarily, right? Like, their online tournaments might just be digital from now on. Who knows?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Like, I think there is going to still be drafts at stores. I just think it's going to be a while. I'm still uncertain whether or not it's going to go back to the way things were before. I think the phrasing "new normal" kind of set this whole precedent in people's minds, where they're going to accept the changes, whatever happens. But regardless, I think the property and the game is safe, and I think it's in good hands for now. Like, for now, I think it's going to be around. It's going to be around for the future, and I hope that it can balance a collectible and a game as best it can, because
they've got a great track record.
Yeah, a lot of people are invested with their time and their money into the game. So I hope that moving forward, they stay the course, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, anyways, any closing thoughts? I think I've taken up a pretty fair amount of your time.
Yeah, no, nothing too crazy. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about Magic and its future and stuff like that. It's fun to just chat with a friend, and hopefully our conversation was interesting enough for the listeners to like take something away from it, or just enjoy a casual hour just listening to something. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter. It's at Massimo MTG. I tweet about like standard or competitive stuff from time to time, StarCraft 1, and speedrunning from time to time. So it's just like follow me if you'd like. If you have any questions, and I'll be on there. That's
Sweet.
it for me.
Well, awesome, man. Again, it was awesome speaking to you. It's been a while. Hopefully we can get face to face soon and play a real game, because I'd love to do that. Okay, man. Anyways, take care, and anyone watching, please subscribe if you're new to the channel, if this video has found you out there, and I will see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Being a patron will help me produce more market movers and add to the funds that I will use for my random buys, and also to my coffee fund, because I drink a lot of coffee for these videos. And here you can see a link below in the description that will give you all the tiers and what you get in each tier. So I hope you guys click and think about joining. And with that, I'll see you next video. Think about supporting the channel in that way. If not, subscribe, like, leave a comment, and I will see you again in the next video.